So a few days ago, IGN interviewed Cliff Blezinski, formerly of Epic Games and the creator of the Gears of War franchise, and a quote from the interview stuck out with me.
The thing is, I will say about the latest ones is that, at the end of one of the recent ones, they made the player choose between which character lives and dies. And I'm like, dude, really? Like, we committed to Dom dying. We committed to, Maria being killed. We committed to Ty's suicide and things like that. Like now you're just painting yourself into a corner narratively. I don't get that. And again, 4 and 5 they're really, really good. I didn't feel some of the heart that we had in the first 3. And I think, people on Twitter continually remind me of that.
After reading this, I had some thoughts on it, and I'd like to express those here today. After these examples I'll provide today, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. Let's think of this as an open discussion on the topic of character building. So, let's start with Gears 2. This game is an emotional roller coaster. Let's use Ty Kaliso as our first example. In the very short time we have with Ty, he's characterized as someone who's very tough to kill, a seasoned veteran who is also a spiritual warrior. He is quickly pitted against the main boss of the game, Scourge, and is taken prisoner. He undergoes the Locust means of torture for, at most, a day or two, and is completely broken, committing suicide as soon as he is freed. This is a good example of show, don't tell, and his death tells us that even a minor amount of torture from the Locust can defeat even the most hardened Gears, which is foreshadowing for what happens later in the game. It also makes Scourge seem cruel, taking such formidable opponents as trophies to break and use. Now, let me compare Ty to Oscar in Gears 4. Let me begin by saying I like Oscar. He doesn't get much characterization in Gears 4, but he has a solid base. He's shown as someone who isn't easy to deal with, but he trains the outsiders to scavenge and survive in a fight. As a former COG soldier, he should know these traits and can help teach the new generation. He's among the first we see taken by the Swarm, and we never see him again. Well, until the post-credit scene, where he stabs his way out of the Snatcher that took him. So, he returns in Gears 5 and is the leader of the Riftworm Outsider Village, and he doesn't want to bring his people to New Ephyra. Once the Swarm attack, he and his people are overwhelmed, and during Kate's connection with the Swarm, he's killed by the Warden she controls. I don't like that Oscar dies here. I think he should have stuck around longer, because at this point in the game, he's one of the only people who fully support Kate and her missions. He could have gone with Kate to New Hope, or even survived until Reyna arrived, seeing how the Swarm had transformed his sister-in-law and maybe even sacrificing himself to protect his niece and former proteges. It feels, like Cliff said, non-committal to even bring him back to kill him in his immediate next appearance. And now, let's do Maria and Dom. Dom has been searching for Maria for almost 15 years. He's asked everyone from Stranded to Anya about any leads on her, and when they finally find out where she is, they shoot their way directly to her. As soon as the pod opens, Dom sees exactly what he's been begging for, Maria, looking exactly how he'd been dreaming. She walks over to him and they hold each other. Dom is completely overwhelmed finding her after all this time, and when Marcus calls to him, he realizes the truth. Maria is a hollow shell of her former self, tortured mercilessly for years. She can't even speak. Dom's joy turns to misery, and he can't even understand the situation. The absolute horror in his face as he looks at her is enough to shake the strongest person. Dom knows the only thing he can do is put her out of her misery, but he can't bring himself to do it. He tells her how sorry he is and how much he loves her, and pulls the trigger. It's a true understatement to say that it's one of the saddest scenes in the series, and one of the best acted. In Gears 3, after a time jump, Dom is extremely depressed. The man who was fueled by the hope that his wife was alive is gone. The most emotion he shows for a while is when the locusts destroy his tomatoes. But when you arrive in Mercy, the town where his wife grew up, the memories come flooding back. At one point, you arrive in a cemetery. Dom stops at a gravestone, and he tells Maria he's sorry he couldn't get to her sooner, but at least she's with the kids now. He places his COG tags on the grave. Dom is truly a broken man, and I believe him placing the tags on the grave symbolizes that he's already dead. When Delta Squad is surrounded by the Lambent, Dom decides to sacrifice himself to save his brother and his friends. Marcus screams at him on the comms as he drives away, begging to know where he's going.
Pulling the plug on him, Marcus! Jump, will you? Do it!
Marcus can't bear to lose anyone, and especially not Dom. Dom calls out to Maria one last time.
Never thought it would end like this, huh? Huh, Maria? Dom! No!
Marcus cries out for Dom and fights his team off of him. He has to get Dom out of there, but he's already gone. The anguish in Marcus's voice really sells the scene, and it's truly one of the saddest moments in gaming in my opinion. I don't believe these scenes can compare, but I'm going to compare them to The Choice at the end of Gears 5. In the second to last level of Gears 5, you are defending the last Hammer of Dawn satellite beacon from the Swarm, when the Kraken, I only learned its name from researching for this video, arrives and destroys the beacon. The ground shifts, and Kate, JD, and Del lose their weapons. Queen Reyna makes her first appearance, grabbing all three with her tentacles. Kate pulls out a knife, and you are given a choice. Save Del, or save JD. Personally, I don't like the idea of making this a choice, and echoing Cliff's sentiment once again, it just feels non-committal. But there are things I still like about the following cutscenes for both options, and I'll get into those now. Regardless of who you save, the other's neck is snapped, leaving Kate and your choice distraught. And soon after, you'll meet up with Marcus. If you save Del, Marcus thanks you for the save, and asks where JD is. Del turns around in sadness, and Kate holds up his cog tags, to which Marcus can only say, and when Kate tries to console him, he pulls away and wants to be alone. If JD dies, all of Marcus's family is lost, and he's truly alone. Foz shows up with a truck, and everyone gets in, while Foz expresses grief for his friend. It's a very well-acted scene, but it's not a great decision writing-wise. If you save JD, the same scene occurs, but I'd like to preface this with a little extra context. Throughout Act 3 of the story, Foz and Del have a little rivalry. Foz saves Del, and Del saves Foz. Del even keeps count of how many times he saves Foz, much to his chagrin. Back to the scene, Marcus thanks you for the save, and then he asks where Del is. JD turns away, and Kate simply shakes her head. Marcus is clearly upset by this news, and heads over to JD to console him. JD pushes him away, and Marcus grabs him and sees JD shedding a tear for his best friend, his brother. And Marcus, knowing this pain, hugs his son. It's truly a great moment, and one of the only times that Marcus gets to be a father in the games. Foz crashes in and gets out of the truck, but this time he says,
"Hey Del, look who's saving who again."
I feel that this scene is so much better, even though I hate to lose Del so soon. Honestly, I don't want either of them to die, but Del's death creates a better mourning scene. Okay, last example. Let's start with Anthony Carmine and Min in Gears 1. Besides sharing a model, these characters actually have a great purpose in the story. Anthony Carmine has multiple throwaway lines that are used for world building. These lines are mostly useless for the current plot, but they establish the setting and make it seem a little more real. For instance, one of Anthony's first lines to Marcus is,
Wait, hey, are you the Marcus Phoenix? The one who fought at Asfield Fields?
Yep.
Wow, cool!
and of course, you'll learn more about it over the course of the game. Anthony says at one point that he had nightmares about the E-holes when he was a kid, which establishes that the Locust threat is one that was terrifying for the general public, but is another world-building line. And my personal favorite of his,
Something's wrong with this thing. It keeps jamming. See?
Sniper!
this is the first example in the series that people can die at any point, but it is also an important line about the series itself, being one of the first games to have a risk/reward system for reloading your weapon. It tells the player to learn the active reload system, or die. Now for Min. He's the first leader you serve under in the games. He's shown to be an experienced veteran, and is very guided by his orders. But I don't want to use him as an example of world-building dialogue. I want to show you how he was used to build the threat even further. Anthony shows that at any time, if you're unprepared, you can die. Min shows that no matter how well you can lead, sometimes you can't win. With his death, even Marcus is stunned by the way Rom executes him. Rom is shown to hold off the chainsaw bayonet with his bare hand, something that no other Locust could dream of doing. He proceeds to pick Min up and stab him directly through the stomach as he looks into his eyes. This instantly makes Rom the main villain, and he seems to be a tough one. I want to compare them to Gary and Lizzie Carmine. Of course, if you've played the Gears series, you know about the Carmine curse. Every introduced Carmine is dead except for Clayton, because he won the contest in Gears 3. So, let's start with Gary. This won't take long. Gary Carmine is an Easter egg. At the end of Act 1 in Gears 4, Gary Carmine can be seen in Reyna's outsider camp. Reyna tells him to get up on the wall and get on the turret. Oscar says he taught Carmine everything he knows, and Gary is immediately crushed by a cog drop pod. Gary dies without a single line of dialogue. This is a little upsetting. I believe every Carmine deserves a scene of some kind. Even Anthony got something for the little time he was there. But hey, not everyone cares about Gary. Even in the multiplayer dialogue for Gears 4 and 5, the other Carmines hate Gary. So let's talk about Lizzie Carmine. People absolutely adore Lizzie Carmine. She's a mechanic, and in her introduction, she runs into a snatcher, which saves a civilian, and sticks a grenade to its head. Even the Coltrane calls her crazy. Lizzie is there to load up all the civilians from Settlement 2 into a convoy and lead them home. She's characterized as loving her Uncle Clay, and ready to kill the swarm. She's leading the convoy to Delta Squad when a swarm axe shoots the building in front of them, which falls in front of the convoy. The swarm are firing at the convoy, locking Lizzie in her vehicle, and it seems like all hope is lost, so JD orders Baird to aim the Hammer of Dawn at his armor and offset it to kill the swarm. Baird warns him that he doesn't have full control over it, and JD tells him to do it anyway, as he runs towards the enemy. They are successful in killing the swarm, but the Hammer of Dawn malfunctions and continues to fire around the convoy. JD runs to help, and he does save the civilians, but he can't get Lizzie's door open in time, and the hammer hits the vehicle, killing Lizzie instantly and disfiguring JD. Lizzie Carmine is just another casualty of the Carmine curse, using her as a plot device to disfigure JD and make him distant from Kate and Dell. Lizzie and Clayton had a good relationship, and they could have had more scenes together. Maybe talking about her uncles, or maybe even making her another member of Delta. I wouldn't have killed her that soon, especially after how fast Gary dies. It just means that the Carmine family has had such a small influence on the new games, when they had such a large influence on the original trilogy. I'm not opposed to her dying. In fact, if she had a similar screen time to Benjamin, her death could have had more meaning. These two deaths are the wrong time to commit, because they could have been well-written characters that gave more meaning to these new games. I'd never want to discriminate against the writer's work unless it truly makes no sense. Gears 4 and 5 have good moments, but some of it doesn't commit to its own work. I'd hope in future they would stick to their decisions and keep a fully coherent narrative, rather than give the player a narrative choice. Personally, I'd leave all the choice in the gameplay. But what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts on my thoughts. Gears 6 is still a few years away, but I can't wait to see what they do with it.